In this video we will be analysing Portugal's contribution to the Second World War as a European neutral nation. Despite its neutral status, this country played an important role in the war, and its significance is often overlooked by many and overshadowed by the events of the Second World War. This video attempts to draw more light to the contributions made by Portugal throughout the war. During the Second World War, Portugal was ruled by the nationalist dictator Antonio de Oliveira Salazar. He was anti-communist and anti-democracy, however he distanced himself from fascism and by most scholars was not considered to be a fascist. Salazar was not a big fan of Hitler, but did support his war against communism. Although he aligned with Germany ideologically, he believed that the Allies would ultimately come out on top. When war was declared in 1939, Portugal announced its position of neutrality, but also reinforced its commitment to the 600-year-old Anglo-Portuguese alliance of 1386. This alliance bound support between the two nations. However, as this was not required by the British, Portugal was free to remain neutral, and would do so. In fact, the British believed Portugal would be more beneficial for their cause being neutral rather than being an ally. The reasons to follow. Salazar set the nation on a middle road for the rest of the war, attempting to favour both the Axis and the Allies equally to avoid being drawn into the war and subsequently invaded by Germany. This would prove a difficult balancing act as both sides fought for control and influence throughout the globe. Portugal's neutral position played a significant role in maintaining Spanish neutrality throughout the war. Sir Ronald Campbell, the British ambassador to Portugal, remarked in 1943, "Strict neutrality was the price the Allies paid for strategic benefits accruing from Portugal's neutrality, and that if her neutrality, instead of being strict, had been more benevolent in the Allies' favour, Spain would inevitably have thrown herself body and soul into the arms of Germany. If this had happened, the peninsula would have been occupied, and then North Africa, with the result that the whole course of the war would have been altered to the advantage of the Axis." So we can see that Portugal's neutral position was fundamental for the Allied cause and for maintaining Spain's position of neutrality. Once France had fallen in 1940, Portugal became one of the last remaining escape routes in Europe. The Germans had overrun Western Europe and would do the same in the Balkans the following year. For many, this left no choice but to flee to Portugal in hopes of finding refuge and escaping continental Europe. Thousands would flee from across the continent with hopes of escaping to the United States and to Palestine, most of which coming from France, Poland, and Belgium. Jews, now being targeted all across Europe, made up a significant portion of these refugees. Citizens of the British territory of Gibraltar also found refuge in Portuguese territory. In July 1940, 2,500 of these citizens were transferred to the Portuguese island of Madeira out of expectation of a German invasion of Gibraltar. Portugal was a beacon of hope for people across Europe and aided many in fleeing the continent. Portugal's wolfram exports, or better known as tungsten, was a contentious issue and would present a challenge to Portuguese neutrality. Tungsten was important for the production of armaments and was therefore of value to both the Axis and the Allies. Portugal established a strict quota system in which it supplied tungsten to both belligerents equally to uphold its neutrality and avoid German antagonism. Trading did, however, favour the British as they were allowed to trade with credits, whereas the Germans were made to trade with gold. Following Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, Germany became dependent on tungsten imports from Portugal and Spain. As the war turned in the Allies' favour, they began pressuring Portugal to embargo its tungsten trade with Germany. However, Salazar resisted, defending his country's right to trade with whom it pleased and fearing that a reduction in its exports might provoke Germany to target its shipping. In June of 1944, under mounting pressure from the Allies and threats of economic sanctions, Portugal decided to embargo its tungsten exports to both the Axis and the Allies, ultimately putting 100,000 Portuguese out of work. Over the course of the war, Portugal amassed a large amount of wealth through its tungsten trade with the Axis and the Allies. As the Battle of the Atlantic developed, the strategic Portuguese islands of the Azores quickly became highly sought after. Germany desired these islands and bases in Portugal for operations in the Atlantic and for the strangulation of Britain. The Allies desired the islands for anti-submarine warfare and as a supply route between North America and Europe. However, Portugal was reluctant to grant these bases to the Allies and jeopardise its neutrality. The Axis and the Allies both drafted plans to invade the islands. Operation Isabella was Germany's planned operation, which included the Portuguese mainland and was to take place following the defeat of the USSR. Operation Alacrity and War Plan Grey was the American operation, which was to take place between 1940 and 1941. However, none of these plans came to fruition. Instead, Portugal granted Britain bases in the Azores through the Anglo-Portuguese alliance in 1943. The use of these islands allowed the British to gain an upper hand over the Kriegsmarine and is known as a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. In 1944, the United States was included in this deal, which significantly shortened US supply routes to Europe and North Africa. This almost halved the travel time, cutting it from 70 hours to just 40. Being a right-wing anti-communist dictatorship, there were some Portuguese volunteers who fought for Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union. However, these numbers were quite low, totaling 159 men. They fought alongside their neighbours in the Spanish Blue Division. In all, Portugal played an important role in the Second World War. By taking a strategic neutral position in the conflict, it was able to avoid the devastation and came out financially well off. Its middle line approach played a significant role in maintaining Spanish neutrality and avoiding a German invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. Portugal's contribution to the war was, while attempting to balance both belligerents, more so favouring the Allies. So what are your thoughts on Portugal's contribution to the Second World War? If you'd like to see me cover other neutral nations, leave a like on this video. Also subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.